Sean Mize here, and I've titled today's faith-based call, How to Keep Going When the Going Gets Tough. And I just felt like that was an appropriate topic for today. I think that my wife and I have been talking some recently about the fact that it seems like so many people that we talk with have gone through something. But I think that what we're beginning to see is a level of fatigue. So it's not like probably most of us are actively going through something, but over the course of the last year, something happened, whether it was at the very beginning, whether it was financial, whether it was with our health, whether we've lost someone. I don't think there's many people that don't know somebody that we've lost in the last year. Social distancing, the weirdness that goes along with it, the people, no matter what you feel, there's people that will argue with how you feel. And I could probably go on. And I think that there's something interesting going on in our world right now, that even if you're not actively going through something, even though you might be, that there's just still this emotional fatigue. And that, I think even 90 days ago, there was this fatigue, but it was sort of like, okay, it's going to be over soon. It's finally going to be over soon. It's going to be over soon. And as things continue to move on, more uncertainty than anything else. And if we look at it objectively, things aren't that bad economically. Obviously, for some people, yes. Things aren't that bad health-wise. Obviously, for some people, yes. And if we know one of those people, if we are one of those people, if we've been through it, I have so many clients that have contracted COVID, and some folks that I know had a very bad experience. Some of them had an easy experience. But if we look at things as a whole, it doesn't look all that bad. I mean, even I think that most of us have kind of gotten used to whatever level of social distancing there is, et cetera. But when we add all of it up, it's like it adds up, and it's this ongoing weariness. Like week bleeds into week, bleeds into week, bleeds into week. Does anybody experienced that? Not so much asking, hey, is that how you're feeling right now, but has anybody experienced that? And I've just talked with so many folks that have, probably in the last year, I've had more moments of down than in years and years. I don't tend to get down for very long. I think there was probably a period of time, many, many years, folks, 20, 25 years, where if I would get down even for a few minutes, you could pretty much count on the fact that 60 minutes from now, I'm not going to be down anymore, no matter what goes on. But circumstances, and I think not just circumstances, but the enemy actively warring against us, whether the enemy is using this situation or the enemy is just picking us out when we're fatigued. That the enemy is using this as an opportunity to war against us and experience a range of emotions that maybe we've never felt before in our life. I want to pray before we go any further. I normally open in prayer, but I felt like I wanted to kind of set the stage, and that stage is kind of moving on still. So, Father, I come before you, and I just thank you for this opportunity to share with these folks. It's so good to be here, and on a Saturday afternoon to be able to share and to talk. And Father, I thank you for giving me this opportunity. Father, I thank you for that. Father, I ask that you'll just simply, because I'm the one that's speaking, Lord, that you'll give me the words, that every single person here will get something out of this, not because of anything wonderful that I might say, but what you pour through me. That for everybody here, they'd hear something that gives them an impact that they can take into the world and maybe pass on that impact. We pray in Christ's name, thankfully, amen. I've experienced some things in the last year that I've never understood how other people would feel going through those situations. I've had my plethora of problems over the last 40, 45 years of my life. that in some ways are unique to a lot of other people. And there's obviously some individuals that have gone through the same thing as I have. They're the kind of challenges that go along with the type of personality that I have. Some of it, the entrepreneurial, not just the streak, but some of the attitudes that go along with that. I've fought over the last decade and not dealt with, but lived with, pride and arrogance for 30 something years. And, really so many of those things that I fought, they haven't been an issue in this last year, yet I've had the opportunity to experience things, to walk in other people's shoes like never before. I don't know, maybe you've been through the same thing. It's kind of like you look back at the last year and it hasn't been worse than any other year in your life, or it hasn't been worse than some of the worst years in your life, but you're experiencing things that don't fit into your usual pattern of warfare. So we as humans tend to get these, we fall into traps, we fall into patterns, and we tend to experience or be tempted by or to fall into the same traps over the course of our life if we don't course correct. And I believe that for many people, this year has been like we're walking in other people's shoes. We had no idea how somebody else could experience that particular emotion. And yet now I'm experiencing it. And I believe that for some of you that you've experienced it. So I want to share some passages with you that I want to be careful that obviously it's not a pithy statement that of course these give us hope. Of course we have hope when we turn to the word. But sometimes in the face of weariness, it's like, well, when is that going to happen? When does that verse come true? When are we released? Some things happen and they happen quickly. All right. We think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? So, they had a situation where very, very quickly they had to make a decision, and very, very quickly then they're thrown into the fire, and very, very quickly Jesus appears, and very, very quickly they're taken out of the fire, and it's like, okay, that's done. That was quick. It's less than 30 days. Daniel in the lion's den, it was quick. It happened quickly. We think about Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt. It happened quickly. I don't know what the time frame is, but probably less than a year from the time that Moses saw and heard the burning bush, went to Pharaoh, came back every 2 or 3 days, was told he could leave, came back every 2 or 3 days and did another plague. Finally, they left. A few days later, they're on their way and they're out, and that happened quickly. So you get in there and you fight a battle and it happens quickly. What we're going through now is beginning to look more like what Joseph went through. Joseph was given the dream, and then Joseph was carted off to Egypt and spent years in either servitude or prison, and servitude in prison. I think it was 13 or 14 years, having no end in sight. And obviously this isn't 13 or 14 years, but for some of you where you've been through something that's a decade long already, this is the icing on the cake. This is finishing up a nasty decade. For some of you that maybe last year was a rough decade, this is like, okay, can't this decade be better? And we've signed up for, practically a year worth of travail, whatever that travail is. Having said that, I want to pop into the word. I'm going to share with you Psalm 37, 23 through 24. I'm going to take a look at this passage from possibly a little bit different perspective. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholdeth him with his hands. And now, we often think of this passage as being a passage that we use when times are good, okay? Or when times are turning around. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. And we're looking for direction in this passage. So we're looking for direction in this passage. And certainly it's direction. And certainly he gives us direction, but sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes it doesn't feel clear. Sometimes we have to take steps of faith to take the step. Over the course of perhaps the last 6 months or a year, I've begun to shift the way that I see this verse and some of the others like it in the Word, that the Lord orders these steps, but we don't always know what they are. That he orders them, but we don't always know what they are, but we can't not take steps. And that there's this interesting thing that happens is that as we take steps, our steps are then directed, and that's part of the ordering. Okay. Now, obviously, you've got to dig deep and you've got to see, where does that fit for me personally? But I'll go off on a side note here and say, and I'll even ask this, have some of you been through something this year that has challenged deep-seated beliefs that you've had for the last 20, 30, or 40 years? Okay, and I'm not talking about bad beliefs. I think that, it could be good beliefs. They're good beliefs. They're rooted beliefs. They're the way that we understand the Word. And yet, and I'm seeing it definitely here that's occurred. I believe that when we go through challenges such as we've gone through in the last year, it allows us to be able to see something in the Word the way someone else sees it. So the words in the Word don't change. The words in the Word don't change. And whatever God meant when he made the words doesn't change. But we see everything in the Word through our own lens, whether it's the lens of experience or it's the lens of our knowledge, what we may have studied. It's the lens of our culture. It's the lens of where we've studied from, who taught us, what was the attitude thereof. And so let's just take you and I, for example. You may take another verse in the Word and read it one way, and I read it another way. Now, the danger is that we begin to fight with each other over what is right. But what if the way that you read it and the way that I read it is actually both true? That God is so powerful, and that he's all, now I was going to say almost holographic. We don't usually think of God as being holographic. Certainly omniscient, but if we look at something like the Word, there's this holographic presence of God in the Word. There's this, if we look deep enough, there's this holographic presence of Jesus all the way from the very first verse or the first chapter in the Bible all the way to the end, that you can unpack many, many chapters. And I've heard it said you can do this with every chapter, but I would question a few. But that most chapters in the Word, if you study them, you can see evidence of Jesus. You can see evidence of God right there in that passage. And I believe that sometimes it's easy that when we have this deep-seated belief that we've studied, we've learned about, we've studied, we have bolstered up our own belief about it, that we're unable to understand when someone else doesn't believe the same way that we do. But for those of you that over the course of the last year have had your rock solid beliefs shifted, okay, and so I'm not talking about like not believing anymore or something. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about subtle shifts of understanding. It's kind of like the book of Job. When we look at the travail that Job went through, if we read that when times are good versus I read that years ago when times were bad, versus reading it recently when things are not necessarily bad so much as weary, as every little thing, it adds up, and there's this great level of weariness that happens. And some of the verses in especially Job and Ecclesiastes, and even as I say that, I'm thinking, well, it would be Psalms and some of the other places, really begin to take on a life of their own when we're going through something. But I think that what's interesting is that when we go through something, we sometimes view the very same passage with a different lens. And so this is one of those passages for me where that lens has shifted just a little bit. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. You know, we think of Proverbs 3, 4 and 5. And not having, it should be there at the tip of my tongue, but it's close. If somebody will pop it into the chat, then I'll read it. Richard says, yes, isn't that the beauty of the Lord? Isn't that the beauty of the Bible? And it really is, because God's word can be solid for all of us, even if we're not necessarily on the same page. Let's look at the second verse there, though. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholdeth him with his hand. And I believe that this verse holds the key to the future. You see, this verse doesn't say, on the off chance that he falls. It says, though he fall. There's an expectation that from time to time we fall. You know, the Psalm doesn't say, if we go through the valley of the shadow of death. It assumes that we go through the valley of the shadow of death sometime in our life, that he will be with us during the time that we're going through those horrible times. So it's not a matter of saying that we're not going to go through it, or that we can hope that we won't, but most of us, if we live long enough, we're going to go through not just one time, we're going to go through multiple travails in our life that sharpen us. We're going to experience the death of a loved one, or 2 or 10. We're going to experience financial travail sometime during our lifetime. We're going to experience drastic disagreement with people that we love and that we care about at some point in time in our lifetime at a deep level. So we're not talking here about something shallow that goes on for 2 weeks. We're talking about something at a very, 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 very deep level. Here's the thing. Though we fall, we shall not be utterly cast down. You know, the thing is, what's the verse even there for? You know, this verse could have said, well, if you fall, you'll pick yourself back up, but it doesn't. It says, though you fall, you will not be utterly cast down. Is it possible that we will be somewhat cast down? Is it possible that sometimes we go through something with the Lord where we really have been humbled, not just by the enemy, but by the Lord? And it's always, on the other side, it's always for our benefit. I mean, this is where this passage has hope. For the Lord upholdeth him with his hand. So whether we're passing through the valley of the shadow of death, whether we're in prison for several years like Joseph was, whether we're a slave for a period of time, whether we're like Gideon was, threshing the wheat in the wine press. If I remember correctly with Gideon, times were pretty bad. You know, they were hiding out from the enemy. They were hiding so that the enemy didn't steal their wheat. It was a rough time. It was a rough time. We think about the drought with Elijah and the drought. Sure, he called it on, but for 3 years, that's a really long time to go without rain, especially in an agricultural society that doesn't have miles and miles and miles to be able to pump water, you know, out of the mountains and pump water over the mountains. and pump water out of the ground 1,000 feet out of underneath the ground in our own world. In that agricultural world, if it didn't rain, the animals died. If it didn't rain, the food wasn't able to grow. Talk about amazing food shortage, amazing food shortage. But watch this. The Lord upholds him with his hand. Now, what hope does that give us? Once again, we can look at the word and we can say, okay, there's the word. We're going to get through this. But it's disappointing that we're not yet. And I think that obviously we have to come at some point to this place of just having a level of discipline that says we're going to have the discipline and we're going to have the patience to go through. But I really believe that if we can go through whatever the time period is left, that you're being tortured emotionally because of social distancing, or that things are in a rough spot financially, or you're dealing with the sickness of somebody in your life right now. So whatever it is, obviously we're not expecting it. We don't expect in our hearts that it's going to be a long period of time. But if you're at that place, and I think several of you are, okay, that you're at that place where you're like at the end of your rope, like it's really rough. I want to encourage you. Here's the thing. In my position, maybe I should say, as a mentor or a coach, I show up for a coaching call. It's my responsibility to cheer folks on and for folks to get the work done and for me to remain that leader and for me to be that leader there. But the truth of the matter is, on several counts, this has been a rough year for me. We've all gone through it together. And for some of you that, 6 months ago, you were able to see some of that. 3 months ago, you were able to see some of that. And so I can tell you, I've had to rely on passages just like this in the Word and just simply blindly believe. I'm using the word blindly loosely, okay? But after decades of trusting the Lord through things that are much worse than this year, okay? But through decades of trusting the Lord, at some point, there's just a decision there that says, whatever happens, kind of like Job, if he takes everything away. I think Job said, we're born naked and God has the ability and the right to take everything away so that we die naked. That's a loose paraphrase, but the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Sometimes the enemy takes away from us. And we fight and we fight and we stand and we stand and we stand firm and we stand some more. And we have to keep waiting, just like Joseph did for 13 years, I believe it was, just like Joseph did, just like the Israelites did on their way to the promised land for 40 years, just like Moses had to live his last 39 or 40 years unable to go to the promised land because of mistakes that he made. What a sentence. I don't think any of us believe that this is 40 years. This is rough because it goes against our sense of freedom, to be able to go out to eat every night if we want to, our sense of freedom to have fast food when we want to, our sense of freedom to call somebody up and go see a movie, our sense of freedom to not think twice when we go to church. Our sense of freedom, not just because of things that have happened with the virus, things that are political that have occurred, regardless of what side of the wall that you're on, okay? But the things that have occurred politically, there's almost an isolation, whether you're physically isolated or if you're not. There's almost an isolation politically. There's an isolation with people. There's an isolation in your mind. Richard, you said that it wasn't too bad, and that's cool. Obviously, closing the church for a while, that was the worst. It is a global situation. It is. The thing is, unfortunately, even in your parish, your church, there's people that it hasn't been that bad for, And then there are people that it has been so bad, you may not even realize how bad it's been for those individuals. I think that the isolation of the last year, although obviously some of you live in places where the things are opening up more, and you know, but there's a difference between legally opening up and people actively congregating. As humans, we get accustomed to, we get used to, we need certain levels of human interaction. And for most people, that level of interaction has gone down significantly. You know, even if you're comfortable, there's other people in your life that are not. And so those levels of interaction have gone down significantly. And I'm going to share something. I think that for a lot of folks, the first couple of months might have been rough, but then you just sort of settled into it. It was a break and it was no big deal. It was going to go away. And I believe that there's possibly even an uptick in interesting loneliness, an interesting isolation. Let's get back into the word, and then I want to share another insight that I've had about this isolation as it pertains to the online world. Okay, because obviously so many of you are connected online. You're connected more than just hanging out in social media. You're connected because you're in coaching. You're connected because you network with folks. You're connected because you're teaching online. You're connected in some way. These passages do me good when I think about where God is. Okay, so God's obviously in control, right? He's on his throne. He prevents the enemy from doing everything that the enemy could do. You know, there's war being waged in the heavenlies right now. I believe that deeply. It's affecting us. If we revisit, and we won't go too much into the story, but if we revisit the time of Daniel called Belshazzar, when King Nebuchadnezzar had that strange dream where he was under a huge tree and the tree was cut down, and Belshazzar explained to him that the interpretation of the dream was that he'd basically been proud. He'd said, "This is my kingdom," and that if he didn't change his ways, that he would, his power would be taken away from him for 7 times. And I think that most scholars will say that was 7 months, 7 seasons of the moon, but it could have been 7 years. And so he was given the dream, and Daniel interprets the dream, and Nebuchadnezzar writes himself, and for a year he's doing pretty good. And then finally one day he walks out on his terrace and he opens up his arms and he says, "Wow, look at this amazing kingdom that I have built." And at that moment he was cast down, and he ate with the animals, and he lived with the animals, and he grew hair like animals for 7 months. And when he came back, he gave great glory to God. But in that story is this concept, this idea that Nebuchadnezzar is not alone. Nebuchadnezzar is not the only, that God gives all success or permits it. Deuteronomy tells us that God gives us the power to get wealth. But that power always comes from him. It comes directly from him. And I believe that power is given to anybody who has success, that power has been given to them by God. You see, let's take a look at this passage. Psalms 37, 1-7. "Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity, for they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb." Let's skip to verse 7. "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass." You know, truth be told, I think until the last year, I used to interpret these verses as being that evildoers and those that prosper in his way, somebody that's bringing wicked devices to pass, was somehow doing it in their own power. That this verse is meant to encourage us who are seeking God's power when we look at the evil and the wicked who perhaps are succeeding when they are doing bad things, and we are not succeeding when we're doing everything we can to follow him. But if we dig deep into Deuteronomy, he gives us the power to get wealth. We dig into the situation with Daniel giving this interpretation to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom was taken away from him because he did not give God credit. At the end of the 7 times, he says, God, obviously I give you all credit. All power comes from you. So if this is true, and it doesn't just apply to Nebuchadnezzar, it doesn't, obviously. It really applies to everybody, doesn't it? Because you see, Nebuchadnezzar wasn't a Christian. Nebuchadnezzar didn't follow God. I mean, maybe in some sense he did, but he was from all of understanding, he was a pagan king. And what we read is that even though he wasn't following God, that the power that he had to get wealth, to be successful in today's terms, came from God. If we dig deep into this, if we look back at some of the success that we've had in our life, so for many of you, you've been very successful in the offline world, but you've struggled online. But you were very successful for 20 or 30 years in the offline world. And there's things that I was successful in. Now, obviously, I've been successful, very successful online. And obviously, in this setting, I give God all the credit, right? And yet, I've worked really hard the last 14 years for those things to occur. And if I'm on an interview, if I'm somewhere and somebody says, hey, what are the 7 steps that you took to make this happen? It's real easy to just give 7 tactical steps and leave the Lord out of it and not be intentional about it at all. But it is very, very easy for me to attribute certain things that occur. So a certain result that occurs with a webinar, a certain result that occurs with a sales letter, a certain result that occurs with a coaching program, a certain result that occurs with a client. Boy, it's just so easy to look at a cause and effect thing. Wow, I taught this, they got this result. Woohoo. I wrote this copy and this is what happened. And this is the revenue that came in. These are the lives that are changed. Woohoo. If God holds all power and we can't do anything on our own, I hope that you're getting the flavor of this, that if we are successful at all, whether we follow him or not, the situation with Nebuchadnezzar indicates to us that God gives that power and that control every single time. Is it possible that during a time like this, we're trying to look inside of ourselves instead of to him for that answer that's going to happen, for that turnaround that's going to happen, for something that's going to happen? Is it possible that as we look back, and obviously for me, the first 12, 13 years in this business, most of the time very successful, okay, or at least successful for who I was at that time, right? Many of you have been very successful, more successful than I was offline. You've been very, very successful. How easy is it to look back on our time? And I want to be very careful that I'm not laying something on you that I wouldn't lay on myself, all right? Because I've been very introspective the last few months, the last year. But is it possible that taking credit away from God for some past success is part of what's stopping us, almost like we're in that wilderness, we're in those 7 times? You know, the Bible indicates that God's not partial. And if God would do that to Nebuchadnezzar, and it was 7 times, you know what? He might do it to us and it's 3 times. He might do it to us and it's 14 times. It may not look like we're crawling around like an animal in the grass, but it might feel like that. And is it possible that the release doesn't happen until we let everything go? We let everything go that we're holding on to, that we're trying to hold on to life, that we're trying to control whether we get a virus or not. We're trying to control what happens in other people's lives. We're trying to control what happens in the business. We're trying to control our emotions, et cetera, et cetera. Is it possible? So I'm not going to hammer on that anymore. I've had a lot of time to think about that and consider it. Maybe you have been. Maybe the Lord's been putting some of the same thoughts in your mind, and it's kind of good to hear me saying something similar. Or maybe you're like, oh, wow, Sean, you really hit me broadside today because I'd never considered that. And don't worry, I didn't consider a lot of these things 6 months ago. So I've just had a little more time to process it than you. Let's read the rest of this passage and let's just look at the good verses, right? Verses 3 through, let's say, 6. Trust in the Lord and do good, so shalt thou dwell in the land, and so shalt thou be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee desires of thine heart. Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. He shall bring forth thy righteousness as the light, and thy judgment as the noonday. And this is the promise. This is the promise. And here's the thing. We've seen the promise come true time and time and time again. So we look at Noah, built the ark, was laughed at, was ridiculed, 100 years, didn't know if the boat would float, had to spend, 168 days or something like that on the boat, but he came out on the other side. Moses, oftentimes we think of Moses' battle starting at the burning bush, but Moses' battle actually started his birth. But let's say that it started when he was maybe a late teenager, an early man, and in his heart, he wanted to do something big for God. He wanted to take the Hebrews back. He really wanted to, and he could not stand the fact that the Egyptian guards were pushing people to their limits, possibly abusing them. And in a moment of anger, he killed one of the guards. That's where it really started. And at that time, he was banished to Midian for, I think it was 40 years. Banished, wilderness, 40 years. His lifespan was a little bit more than probably most of us would expect, 120 years. But that's a long period of time. I guess if we do the math, then he must have killed the Egyptian when he was close to 40. He spent 40 years in that wilderness, but what did that wilderness do for him? Well, when he came out of the wilderness, he wasn't killing people anymore. You see, when he went into the wilderness, he had a wild streak. Not only did he have a wild streak, he had an anger problem, he had a wrath problem, he had a rage problem. And you see, the rage isn't the problem. It's what he did with it. We can get angry, but it was what he did with it. But 40 years later, he didn't have that problem. Well, he still had a little bit of it because, that's where he got mad at God and he slammed the rock, and he'd probably done some other things and that led one to another to him not getting to go into the promised land and spend 40 years in the second wilderness. But think about this. He found his wife and had his children in Midian. He also was introduced to a wise person, Jethro, so his father-in-law. And how do we know he was wise? Because when Jethro came to visit him when they were in the desert, Jethro saw Moses was trying to do everything by himself. He was trying to do all of the judging by himself. Jethro said, you can't do that. And you know the story, and he gives him great wisdom. He got some of the wisdom that he was able to use in taking care of the Israelite people for the 40 years while they're wandering the desert from that time in the wilderness. But he made it off to the other side. He carried the Israelites out. Joseph made it through his 13 years and was able to exist as a ruler for probably the rest of his life. So Gideon was able to come out of the wine press where he was pressing the wheat and separating the wheat, whatever they do to wheat. And obviously we have to be careful that we're not giving him credit, but with 300 men, he was able to fight the enemy and God was able to give him that victory. You see, here's the thing. God will give us a victory on the other side of this. It may only be a month more, it may be 3 months more, it may be 3 years more, but there's a victory on the other side, unless we go home to be with him in the meantime. And of course, that's victory for the person that escapes, right? Commit thy way into the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass, just like he did for Gideon, just like he did for Joseph, just like he did for Moses. I want to talk about one thing online, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. All right. I really feel like the Lord wants this to be almost a time of reflection. Sometimes it's so easy to come to a message, to be a message, and it's all about the rah-rah. It's all about pick your chin up, which is cool. There's a place for that. But I also believe that especially when we're going through something, whether we're going through illness, whether we're going through sickness, whether we're going through a financial difficulty, we're going through an emotional turmoil, there is a place for evaluation. Moses had to evaluate when he was in Midian. Joseph had 13 years of slavery and prisonhood to evaluate. We're given opportunities to evaluate and to grow. But if we never turn introspective, because we've always got to be positive, because we've always got to have our chin up, because we've always got to have a smile on our face, if we don't take time to be introspective, I think sometimes we miss the lessons. Job had time to be introspective. I'm going to talk about online for just a minute. And I'll just say it. Online is a fake panacea. Online is a fake sense of community. Fake. It's fake. And I would submit to you it's gotten faker in the last year. And I'm going to say that because I think that the mainstream media and much of what you hear from gurus and mentors that want to encourage you and motivate you are basically saying that people are spending more time in social media, because they're socially distanced, right? And I believe that the connotation for that is that it's a good thing. That by being in the social media, that it's a good thing. And that it is this outlet. And I would say that to some degree, possibly it is, with the right individuals, with people that are perhaps real friends, that were real friends prior to the pandemic. But this is a personal belief, so I won't try to defend it so much as just share it with you and give you some food for thought. Because I'm beginning to believe that for folks that are spending more time in social media, more time in social media groups, have you seen how much marketing is going on in social media groups in the last 6 months? So much of that is because people are spending the time in social media, and that's the place where so many marketers are capturing attention, is in those groups. What are people really getting out of that besides a numbing that allows the day to go by faster or to go by at all? Is that meaningful interaction? If we double online interaction, and I believe that for some people, interaction online has desperately increased, possibly as much as double, and I believe that it is possible that the true level of meaning in that online interaction has gone down by as much as the time spent has gone up. Now, folks, I don't know what the answer is, okay? So you can't meet people outside. You can't, you know that the more time that you spend in social media, then the level of that interaction is going down. But I'm sharing that with you because if you are going through something right now where you're spending more time in social media and you're feeling like that should be making things better, but you're actually feeling more alone, is it possible that the greater level of interaction in social media is making that happen? Is it possible that you'd be better off to disassociate with, not with all of it, but with some of it, and to make a choice that you're going to spend time in very specific certain places, and possibly as a leader? I wasn't planning to talk about this, but I'm going to give this to you right now. Is it possible that when you're spending twice as much time in social media being fed, that no matter how capable you believe yourself to be or don't believe yourself to be, or how experienced you believe yourself to be or don't believe yourself to be, is it possible that you could actually have an emotional turnaround if you were to begin to become the teacher? If you were to create your own social group and you were to begin to invite everybody in the groups that's hanging out in those groups with you, that's going through the same malaise that you're going through, if you were to invite them to be a part of a new group, and you set rules for the new group, hey, this is going to be a special group where there's none of a certain kind of behavior, where we're not going to tolerate any kind of criticism, or maybe it does tolerate constructive criticism, I don't know, but that there's a basket of rules. And let me share something with you. When you create rules, you create differentiation. You don't have to have a lot of rules, but as soon as you create some rules, you make it a special place. Think about everywhere we go that has rules, it's a little special. So church has rules, and depending on where you go to church, the rules are different, but church has rules, the place feels special. You go to the library, there's rules. You don't talk too loud. You don't run all over the library, and so it feels special. Places that we go that have rules feel special. In fact, if we even think about it, if we have rules in our family, if we have rules in our household, our family and our household can feel more special. Think about that. So what if you were to say, you know what? You're absolutely right. I'm getting twice as much input, but I'm not giving out enough. And look, I get it. I think it's easy for us sometimes to think nobody will listen to me. Look, I'm not whining or anything, but there's 9 people here. Okay. Most of you could get 9 people into a social media group. Most of you. Probably all of you could get 9 people in a social media group. Most of you could get, in a few weeks, you could get 9 people to show up for a live in a social media group. And I want to encourage you that if you do that, and then you say, well, I just shouldn't do it because only 9 people show up. Sometimes you just got to push through. Sometimes you just have to push through. But I believe that for some of you, this might be the cocoon that's going to allow 2 things to happen. Number 1, for the past to be set behind. I'm going to go ahead and put, so obviously, hey, we're here. We have this screen here. I'm going to use it as almost a whiteboard. And I'm going to suggest right here on the screen, okay, let's have some fun. I'm going to suggest that this time might be like a cocoon. I want to get this on the screen. And just think of it like a class. This time might be like a cocoon where you are leaving some things behind and growing into some new things. You see, I don't even want to say that when times are good, but obviously when times are good, it's easy to be comfortable with however they are. And so no matter how much inside of us we think we need to grow or to make changes, if there's no pressure, why leave the cocoon? But when things are difficult, why not leave some things behind? There may be parts of your business, there may be interaction that you have in social media, that now would be a perfectly good time to shift gears, to move on. And maybe one of those things that you grow into is that you grow out of spending as much time getting fed by multiple other people. And by the way, I'm not speaking against counsel. I'm not speaking against mentorship, but there's a big difference between listening to 3 voices that you respect and listening to 100 voices every day and trying to figure out whose voice you're going to listen to today. I'm going to listen to 100 voices and what's the one thing I'm going to change in my business today based on 100 voices. And then tomorrow I get 100 more voices and I go, I'm going to make another change and another 100 voices. Every day it's 100 different voices making the decision. Would it be better to just listen to one voice or two voices or three voices? And in all that time that you get back, all of that time that you get back from not listening to the other 97 voices, and that might be emails, that might be noise that's coming in. What if you took all of that time and you became a voice? What if you took all of that time and you became a voice? You know, here's the thing. 2 years ago, people would say to me, well, you know, I just don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I have enough of a following. I don't know if I'm experienced enough. And, you know, I think 2 years ago, I bought into some of that. And so I would say things like, well, you need to buck up and go take some lessons and get good enough, right? And I would say things like, well, just get started and grow into it. But I'm going to suggest something a little bit different today. Okay, so responding to this idea that you don't think you're good enough, that you don't think that you have enough to share yet, that you don't, that you can't contribute, that you don't know enough, that you don't have enough certifications. You know what I say today? So what? So what? Because the truth of the matter is there's somebody out there that needs to hear what you have to say. The truth of the matter is I don't feel like I've shared anything special today. Like deep inside, like who cares? So what? So what that I've been able to share some of the thoughts that have been on my mind that I've perhaps grown into or grown through in the last year, but who cares and so what? And yet, I'm not sure anybody's left in the last hour. And folks have been coming on. And I haven't obviously been watching the thing for the whole time. So I don't want to, you know, who knows, maybe somebody left. It wasn't a good fit. But for everybody that's still here, something connected. What if I didn't do this today? And I want to flip this around because there's no pride in it. I didn't feel like teaching. But the truth of the matter is, I would believe, and feel free to type into the chat, but I would believe that you've gotten something out of my musings today. But I say that not for my own sake. I say that because you have an audience of people who will get something out of you no matter what you share, no matter what certification you don't have, no matter what experience you don't have. And so as we wrap up, I want to have a call to action for you. All right. And this isn't a buck up. This is okay, we're going through this. Maybe you can't change the world right now. Maybe you're not going to start a huge business right now. But if you're following 20 social groups, I'm trying not to name company names right now, but so you know exactly who I'm talking about. So if you're following 20 groups and you're reading 20 posts a day, and you're watching some lives, and that's what's being poured into you. Is it possible that you have a responsibility to be sharing 20 posts a day? Is it possible that if you're listening to 3 hours of lives every day, that maybe you should be doing 30 minutes of lives? Like, should it be a one-way street? Should you only be soaking up from the other teachers and not teaching somebody something? You know, here's the thing. I'm not talking to the average population right now, am I? Every one of you is either a coach or a consultant, or you have a dream of writing a book, or you have an info business, or you want a social business, or you're an agency. Even if you don't actually have the business right now, that's your desire. You wouldn't be interacting with me Okay, because I don't maintain a separate call list for this faith-based call. If I invite you, it's because we've met through some business arena. Okay, so therefore I can say you either have a business or you have a dream to have a business. You have something inside of you that other people can use. If only, let's say, and here's what happens when I talk with some folks one-on-one. I don't get that right now in the chat, but here's what happens when I talk with some folks one-on-one. You know, what's going on in your business? I'm struggling. I've been buying trainings. I get stuck. I need some help. How long has that been going on? 3 years, 5 years, 10. People tell me 5 years, 10 years. I've been in the wilderness of this internet marketing thing. And I might say something like, well, you think it's time to maybe write that book? Maybe it's time to create that website. And they say, I just don't feel like I'm ready. And like I said, I used to just buck people up. I go, look, you just need to get ready. You need to get over yourself. You got 10 years worth of study. I'm going to flip the script for you right now and say, you know what? Who cares if you're not ready to teach what you think you're supposed to teach? How many millions of people have come online in the last year that are getting ready to go through the 10 years of wilderness that you just went through? Don't think about that. You know, because I could sit here and I could think and I could tell the story. I could weave the story that millions of people have come on in the last year, and that what we really should be doing is creating training programs to teach these people how to build their business. The truth of the matter is, no matter how many training programs that you create, no matter how much a better job you do than all the gurus and mentors out there, and do a better job than I have in the last 10 years, you can be an absolutely amazing motivational person. Guess what? The failure rate for these new people coming online is going to be about 90%. Isn't that sad? Maybe instead of trying to save the failure rate, if you don't feel like you're qualified for that, what if you were to reach out to those folks and help them in some way shift whatever it is that makes that 90% failure rate happen? And I don't know what it is. I mean, there's lots of things that fall into that. But, you know, whether that's mindset, maybe it's waking people up to the fact that you have a 90% chance of failing for the next 10 years. You have a 90% chance of wasting every single dollar you spend building your online business for the next 10 years, because I went through that. And here's how to deal with that. Is it possible that if and I don't know who I'm speaking to, if anybody, is there possibly a need in the market for almost like an internet marketing or consulting coach, counselor type of person that can help people deal with failure, that could help people, maybe success happens online. We talked earlier about all success comes from God. But if we're looking at it from the human components, maybe there's two components. Maybe it's not just the training. So obviously I have an internet marketing training business, consulting training business, and I teach the things. And then, we show up once a week or twice a week, and I attempt to motivate folks. So there's this teaching and there's this motivation. But what if it takes a third stool? What if it actually takes counseling? What if it takes somebody that has an emotional experience? Because look, here's the thing. Some of these people that are coming online thinking with stars in their eyes, like the people that went in 1848 to rescue gold from California. They're coming online after having a job for 30 years, after punching a time clock for 30 years, after running a company for 30 years. They come online where there's no rules, there's no boundaries, there's no clear direction. There's 100 people talking to you all day long in social media. Let's say that you were a CEO for 10 years in your business. Maybe you were a manager for 10 years. Did you have 100 of your employees in your office every single hour of the day, knocking on your door, whispering in your ear, begging for this, begging for that, giving you advice? No. If you had an hour of 100 people giving you advice, after an hour, you'd kick them all out because you knew you couldn't do your job. So we got people that have been in the offline world for 20 to 30 years. that have decided because they got laid off or because they're home or because of something that they're going to start this internet business, and the internet must be easier than having an offline job because all these kids are doing it, and all, there's all these reasons why the internet must be so easy. And we read all the sales copy that says the internet is so easy. And they bang their head against the wall for 3 months, 6 months, some of them now a year. And they don't understand what's wrong with them because for 30 years, they've been successful offline. I have clients come to me that have been very successful, CEOs, vice presidents, managers, run their own business, made hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in their own business, and get absolutely, completely, and totally sabotaged and lost online. So we can talk all day about how online is theoretically easier. It's a $10 domain name. It's $20 a month in hosting. It's a little bit of copywriting. It's hire somebody for some graphics. It's go take a copywriting course. I mean, I could go on and on. There might be 1,000 lines. The truth of the matter is online feels so easy. And I'm not talking to you. I'm speaking to you, but I'm not speaking this about you. I'm speaking this about the next generation that's coming online. Is there something you could offer those individuals? Could you be a shepherd? I don't know who I'm speaking to here, but is it possible that you could be a shepherd for those individuals? That you could guide people through the wilderness of starting their own business, maybe of just being able to be focused. So much of success online, I really think it comes down to focus. The skills are pretty easy to learn. It's pretty easy to learn to copyright if you want to. It's pretty easy to learn to do graphics. It's pretty easy to learn to do a website. It's pretty easy to learn how to do a lead magnet. It's pretty easy to learn how to write an article. It's pretty easy to learn how to run ads if you're going to run ads. All of those components are pretty easy. The problem is it requires about 10 or 12 of them stacked up in a row with lots of focus leading from one to one to one to one to one. They've all got to be pointing in the right direction. And you can't jump ship every week. You see, what I've just shared is something that's not shared in all the programs. It's not shared in all the groups that you're a part of. It's not shared in all the places that you're trying to get support from, but it's not working for you. What if you were to flip this around and recognize that if you're in a group of 6,000 people and you feel lost, guess what? 5,800 of those people feel lost too. What if you're in 10 groups with 4,000 people apiece? You actually have access to 40,000 people, most of whom feel the same way you do. And here's the thing, if you were to say, well, I don't know more than they do, how can I lead them? What if Moses said to God, I can't do this. I can't lead the people out because I'm just a sheep farmer out here in the land of Midian. Oh, actually he did, didn't he? He said, no, God, you can't use me because I can't talk. And he had 3 or 4 different excuses, right? I don't remember what they all were. And God said, oh, Aaron will do your talking for you. And he goes, well, no, I can't do this because of this. And then he's like, I don't have any power. And so God's like, look at that rod in your hand, throw it down. It becomes a snake. Oh, wow. Pick it up. Now it's not. What was the last thing, Richard? I think there was 3 things. He argued with God. I'm no better than the rest of the people. It weren't those words, but I'm no better than the rest of the people. You can't use me, God. I can't go to Pharaoh. Let me ask you this. What if that's you? What if you are in 10 social media groups apiece right now, 4,000 people in each one? It's like they're all sheep. And can I be brutal with you right now? You're one of the sheep. In that setting, don't be offended, but in that setting, you're a sheep. You're like Moses was in Midian. You're a sheep farmer, but you're not even farming because you're an equal to everybody else in that group. You're sitting there listening to the social media lives go all day long. You're listening and you're waiting for the notifications to come in. You're signing up for 8 webinars a day so you can go listen to the first 10 minutes and decide if you should stay. There's no way to build a business. You have more focus in that. But wait a second. Is it possible that because everybody else in those groups that's on the receiving end of the lives, have you ever noticed when somebody says, oh, there's a live today, there's 300 people watching and you're sitting there commenting and they're asking you to type yes in if you agree. They get you to put 19 yeses in the checkbox. And you're like, I'm smarter than this, but you know what? You're doing it right along with the other 300 people. Now, wait a second. Is it possible that now is the time for you to rise up and start doing your own lives and start personally inviting everybody you know in all the other groups, even in that group? You reach out, say, hey, I've been watching you. I've seen your name a few times. I'm holding up alive in a couple of days, going to talk about just this one tiny little thing. Would love if you'd jump into my group. How big of a group could you build and have a followership? Now, I know we're getting off of the spiritual topic and I'm moving on. I hope this is helpful for somebody, but let me suggest to you now, okay, it's that coach inside of me. Let me suggest to you now that if in the next 90 days you were to invite 5,000 people to your new little group, and 2,500 people joined your group, and 500 of them started coming to your live, and you didn't teach on very much because you feel like you don't know very much. And you ask those 2,500 people, what are you doing here when all of those other people out there you could be learning from, but you're here? And whatever the answer is that they tell you, you build your own coaching program, or you build your own consulting program, or you build your own product around that topic. I'll share one story with you and we'll go back to spiritual and we're going to quit because we're over. I remember when I got started in this business, folks. So 14 years ago, I got started and it was very, very modest beginning. I was just writing articles. I was gaining 100, 200, 300 subscribers a month. I was comparing myself against some of the big names. I was learning from the big names that had like 500,000 subscribers. They were getting 10,000 subscribers a month. And I'd kind of done the math and I said, wow, if I just build to 5,000 subscribers, that's a full-time income. And that's what I was doing. I was just building towards the subscribers. I don't know how I'm going to monetize them, but the big boys have subscribers. I have to have subscribers. So I was out there getting subscribers, 200 or 300 a month, nothing special. And so my third or fourth month in the business, it was probably my second or third month in the business. I was writing emails every day. I was asking people, hey, what do you want to learn? They'd ask me questions I didn't know the answer to. I went to Mr. Google and I found the answer, and then I wrote an article and sent it back to them. And that's how I learned so much of what I learned online. I just asked people what they wanted to learn because I didn't even know the questions to ask. They asked the questions. I'd go do the research. Once I researched it, I learned it, wrote it in an article, sent it to them, and they thought I was pretty smart. For about 90 days of that, right? So then 2 or 3 months into my little business that I started the same way I'm talking about with you here, except I didn't start in groups. I started with content, same difference, just different times. I sent an email out and I said, hey, I'm thinking about writing a book. What should I teach if I were to write something? And people started saying, I want you to teach me how to build a list. I was floored. And I actually named names. I'm not going to do it on this call, but I named names back then because there were people that had 500,000, a million names on their list, and they were teaching these big courses, and you could go to a big coaching program and learn how to build a list. And I just flat out asked them, I said, look, all I am is a measly little guy that's made 1,000 subscribers in the last couple of months. Why on earth would you study from me instead of from the guy that has 1 million? Because he's got to be better than me. And almost to a fault, you guys and gals can guess what they said, right? Because if I asked you now, you'd say it. They said, you know what? I like learning from you because you're real and because you're doing it. You know what they told me? They told me I can't identify with the guy that has 1 million subscribers and he has 25 employees and he has $1 million budget for ads. I can't identify with him. So even if I buy his course, I don't think I can do what he can do. But they said to me, I watched you for the last 90 days write articles and build your little business from scratch. And since you did it, I believe I can do it. And it's truth. And in fact, I used to use that origin story for the first 5 or 6 years in my business. And after a while, I kind of stopped using it because it no longer kind of fits what I do now. And yet I believe that the believability that people had when they heard that story gave new subscribers the belief that they could do it. And that was a powerful part of growing my business. What is this to you? I believe that every one of you is possibly in exactly the same place that I was 14 years ago, when I thought I didn't have much to offer because I compared myself to people with 1 million subscribers. For many of you, you may not have the same presentation skills as the guy or gal that's getting 1,000 people to show up for a live. You may not have the same training skills as all the people that you're studying. But the truth of the matter is 90% of the people that are in the groups that you're a part of, if they saw you getting traction, they might actually rather learn from you because they can believe it can be done than to continue to learn from the person that has a green screen and 8 cameras and somebody to bring him water and coffee while he's working and somebody to fix her makeup while they're working and to do these big studio shoots. It's possible that right there in your current world, there are people that if you did anything like hold your first live or your 10th live or grow a group, that they would begin to see you as someone they would follow, even if they didn't see you as a guru or a mentor. And it's possible that as soon as that happened, once you began to get that followership, that you could begin to write the books and to create the videos and to put a small price on them and to begin building your business the same way I did 14 years ago. Okay. I hope that was motivational and helpful. Obviously, we got a little away from the kind of the spiritual, but boy, sometimes there is something that happens when what we do entrepreneurially kind of mixes with the faith that we have, because the truth of the matter is we don't go through life with our brain over here and our body over here and our spirit over there. We walk through our life with our spirit, our soul, and our body all day long. We have our spirit and our soul and our body. And when you're in a group, you have your spirit and your soul and your body. When you're teaching, it's your spirit and your soul and your body. It's all of you. And I want to suggest to you that for many of you, this is a time of great beginnings. It's a time to let go of whatever's been in the past and to allow this to be a great beginning going into the future, and that you, wherever you're at, you can become a leader in the next 90 days, not by doing anything big and bold and not by being the best and the baddest, but by simply beginning to create a following and teaching something until you figure out what they really need and you get better and better at it, just like I did at the very beginning. I'm going to read what Robert shared here. Moses' excuses. Thanks for looking that up. I don't have the ability. I don't know what to say. I don't have any authority or position. I'm not a good speaker. Oh my Lord, please send someone else. Excuses and procrastination are usually the right hand and the left hand. And I just want to suggest to everybody here that, wow. We've all made the excuses. I've made the excuses. Okay, I just happen to be the person running the live right now, right? Right? That's the only difference. But I want to implore all of you that if you're online because you want to build something and you felt discouraged in the past because other people have more talent than you. Look, if God wanted talent, he probably wouldn't have picked Moses. If God didn't want a whiner, he probably wouldn't have picked Moses. If God didn't want a stutterer, he wouldn't have picked Moses. If he wanted somebody that already had authority or a position, he would have promoted him back when he killed the Egyptian, right? No, God waited until he didn't have any ability and he was a sheep farmer and he was listening to burning bushes and he was walking around in sandals and he didn't have any authority or a position and he wasn't a good speaker and he really wanted God to send somebody else. That's when God picked Moses. And I think the possibility exists that God's picking you right now, that he's picking you right now and he's got something for you. You may don't even have to know what it is to start your own group and start inviting people. Ray, thank you. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate hearing that. I'd love to take just a moment, comments, questions, anything like that before we wrap up. We'll do this still all in one track. I know that we've gone way over, but that's okay. I've had fun here. I trust that you have. Robert, thanks for being the person online and sharing and helping to lift others up into their gifting. Thank you. Thank you. I want to personally encourage you, Robert. I don't know what you're doing right now. I know that you're growing. Okay. But I want to encourage you that if in any way, I don't know, if you've hit maybe a little more, another wall, a new wall. All right. You have new clients now, but if maybe you've hit another wall, I just encourage you to climb that next wall. I don't know where you're at, but I want to encourage you to just push forward. Just push just a little bit. Just push forward just a little bit. I'd say that to everybody here, but Robert just commented, and so it's kind of, that's fresh for me. Father, I lift this time up to you, and I thank you for giving me this time. Thank you for everyone that cares enough about what you put in my heart to be here and to comment. And Father, I thank you for that. Thank you for what you've poured into me. Thank you for what you're pouring into these folks. Father, for anybody here that the last 30 minutes has really resonated, that they realize they're kind of like Moses. They're a sheep farmer right now. Maybe they even feel like a sheep, but that it's possible that their responsibility is not to go get more training first, that their responsibility is not to become the best first, but maybe their responsibility is just to find a way to motivate and encourage the other people in those groups, just like they've been encouraged by me today. That maybe I give an hour of my time to them in this way each week, and then they just pass that on and they give an hour of their time. And as they do that, perhaps that's the start, not just of something spiritual, or maybe something spiritual, but that's the start possibly of that business that some people here have been spinning their wheels for a long time to try to do. And now you're opening a door in front of them that you might have been trying to push open for them for the last couple of months, but something they heard today triggered something. And so, Father, if that's what's happened, I beg you, I ask you that they won't leave here now and then just go back to whatever they were doing before and forget about it tomorrow, but that they would be encouraged today, tonight, this weekend, next week, to start something. We pray in Christ's name, thankfully. Amen. I say that to everybody that's here. Very appreciative of you being here. Couldn't do it without an audience, because I'm able to believe I'm speaking to those of you that are real, because you are real here. And of course, you know, the recording goes out to everybody, and I know you could listen to it as a recording on your way to work or back, or we don't do that as much anymore. You know, wherever you listen to things, I know you could do that. I really appreciate you being here, because it gives me the strength to be able to share whatever I do. Julia, stop watching the evergreen videos as you really got into this one. Cool. And you get back to work. Cool. Awesome. Awesome. I'm so glad to see you back on the scene and making progress. Ray on a focused target. Big wow. Cool. Awesome. Thank you again for the share and transfer. Great. And just remember, it came from God, right? I was the voice piece. I was the voice piece. Nothing special about me, right? I was the voice piece, just like Moses was the voice piece. Well, Aaron had to be the voice piece because Moses wigged. Robert, okay, not huge, and you did help me with the Moses story. Okay, cool. I'll take that. Make it happen. You can just get back into it, or reach out, get back into it. Richard, you're welcome. I know it's late there. Folks, have a good evening. If it's late, have a good afternoon if it's not. And we'll see you next time. We'll see you next place. I'd love to hear a report next time that you've started something, a new channel, a new something, a new video, a new channel, a new something, and you just started inviting people that you know. And I want to give you, I shared it earlier, but I want to reiterate this idea that if you're part of a group, you know, I think we sometimes, and I just might step on an ethical toe right here. And if I do, my utmost apology in advance. You know, it wouldn't be ethical. Well, it may not be ethical. I don't know. It would probably not be ethical. It would certainly not be ethical if you had this big booming business and you purposely joined a group for the purpose of raiding that group of people, right? I mean, I'm sure somewhere on some dotted line that's okay. They're all social groups, but that would be on the wrong side of good ethical behavior, right? For some of you that are thinking, reaching out to somebody else in that group to say, hey, I'm starting a new group. And at first, it's certainly not commercial. It's nothing. You know, maybe I'm wrong. Okay. Being the spiritual call that we're on, I really put that out there. And I would take any criticism that you might want to give me and tell me if I'm wrong. But I'll tell you what, if you're just an equal, if you're a sheep in that group along with everybody else, and you're thinking about starting something new, I'll be honest, I don't believe there's anything wrong with reaching out to another sheep and saying, hey, I'm thinking about starting a group, or I just started a group. And it's not a group that competes with the topic that you're in. It's something else. It's focus, or it's whatever, folks. And let's have some discussion. I'd love to have some discussion, because now I feel like I've gotten myself into what could be some hot water here. What do they say about mint flavored shoes? What do you folks think? Let's just have a discussion, if you would. That if you're just a sheep, just like everybody else, you're not starting a competing group that competes on that topic. You're starting something to shepherd people or to focus people, and you just reach out and say, hey, I'm starting a new group, and if you'd have any interest at all, we'd love to have you join it. What do you folks think? Would that be right or wrong? I mean, there's no verse in the Bible that tells us that's right or wrong. All right, is that right or wrong? And I'd love to get, if you'd help out 3 or 4 of you, that would really be helpful to me, and I think it'd be helpful for others to hear the responses. I'd love to get a couple more before I share what they are, so we don't impact things. I'd love to get two more folks. And there's no wrong answer here, please. So if you're feeling, oh, I'm going to say what kind of goes against the grain, we'd actually like to hear that. I'd love to have some healthy debate if it's possible. 2 of you have posted there. So Richard and Julia, thank you. Anybody else willing to weigh in? So could I get one more person to weigh in on that? I don't want to call the name. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but okay. So Richard says it's okay. Julia, nothing wrong with that. Ray says it seems fine, Sean. It's encouraging. Okay, so thank you. Obviously, folks, if you disagree and you didn't want to offend me in the chat, I'd love to know anyway. And maybe you reach me privately and let me know, because obviously we talked about it here. And Julia started a new group 2 weeks ago. Congratulations. That's right, Julia. People need real leaders right now. And you get me going on something. I think a lot of people running these social groups out there are not acting like real leaders right now. I think a lot of folks that have programs, that are selling programs, they're not acting like real leaders right now. They're really not. And look, I don't blame anybody. They're all going through tough times, right? We've all got things that we've dealt with. I teach very differently than I did a year ago. I like to believe that the quality of the teaching has gone up and way up. And that's more than like to believe. But there's a lot of things that I'm doing different. Some things I'm probably not doing as well as I was a year ago. But I think a lot of things I'm doing better. But I say all that to say that we've all shifted and we've all changed. And you're absolutely right. People need real leaders right now. And I look out over this group, folks that are here, that you're here with me live. You're a real leader. You have the capacity to be a real leader, whether you feel like one or not, because Moses didn't feel like a real leader. He didn't feel like a real leader, and he argued with God and tried to talk himself out of it. And every one of you might be a Moses to this world. You may not feel like a real leader right now, but there's room for new leaders to stand up. So with that said, let's go ahead and wrap up. Thank you, Jesus, for giving us this opportunity together. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share, and thank you for everybody that poured into the chat so that it wasn't a one-way street here. I appreciate you folks. I love you all. We'll see you next time.